What do you mean by that, Mom? Later, as they sat down, Yuni turned to Mrs. Kong and asked, "Now tell me, what did you mean earlier?" Mrs. Kong hesitated, then began, Yin, that TJ group grew to what it is today because of your grandfather's contributions. But because of that, your parents lost their lives in an accident. Yuniel's eyes widened in shock. Mrs. Kong continued, "At first, I thought Junyong married you out of a sense of responsibility for what happened. But now I can see it's more than that. I see the way he smiles when he's with you. It's genuine. He truly loves you." Yun Seal's hands trembled at Mrs. Kang's words, but she managed to respond softly. "Yes, Mom. We loved each other from the beginning. You have a date with him, right? Should I call the driver for you?" Mrs. Kong asked, changing the topic. "No need, Mom. My friend is waiting outside, and he'll take me," Yunio replied, bowing slightly before excusing herself. After changing clothes, she exited the house with a slam of the door, startling Sukin, who was waiting in the car. "Soon, let's just go," she ordered, her voice tense. Meanwhile, Junyoung sat at the restaurant, glancing at his watch. Half an hour had passed, but there was still no sign of Yun Seal. He dialed her number, but there was no response. Concerned, he called his mother, who informed him that Yun Seal had left long ago with a friend. "A friend? Who was it?" Junyoung asked sharply. "It was Sokin," Mrs. Kong replied. Junyoung's jaw tightened. "Did you tell her anything?" Mrs. Kong admitted. "I might have mentioned that I initially thought you married her out of gratitude." "Didn't she know about this before?" Mrs. Kong asked. Running a hand through his hair, Junyoung replied. "I only found out a few days ago, and Grandpa didn't want her to know because it was tied to her parents' accident." Mrs. Kong sighed. "I thought your father might have told you because you spent so much time with him. That's why I only warned you to be careful of the No family." "It's okay, Mom. I'll handle it," Junyoung said before ending the call. Earlier, as Sokin's car approached the restaurant, Yun Seol didn't get out. "Let's go somewhere else," she said, frustration evident in her tone. "Do you want to visit your grandpa's house?" So asked, concerned. "No, that's too far," she replied, wiping her tears. "Yuni, you can tell me what's wrong." "I'm your friend," he offered gently. She gripped the door handle. "I'm sorry. I just need to be alone," she said, her voice cracking. He reached for her hand. "I understand, but let me take you home first," he said firmly. "I don't want to go home. I need to figure something out first before going back," she said, her frustration spilling over. So Kyunin remained silent for a moment, then sighed and replied, "Fine, but I can't leave you alone here. If anything happens, Mr. Kong will have my head." With that, he turned the car around. He drove her to a hotel and booked a room. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked, her voice filled with confusion. "Stay here tonight and take some time to sort out your thoughts. I'll pick you up tomorrow morning," he said, opening the door for her. "Thank you, Sukin. Be careful while driving," she replied, her tone softening. As she expressed her gratitude, he looked at her for a moment, concern evident in his eyes, then nodded and left, closing the door behind him. Alone in the room, Yuniel clenched her phone tightly and dialed her uncle. "Uncle, can you answer my question honestly?" she began, her grip tightening with nervous energy. "What's the connection between Junyong's family and my parents' accident?" There was a moment of hesitation on the other end. "Uncle, I'm not a child anymore. Please tell me the truth," she pressed, her voice trembling. Her uncle sighed heavily before responding. "Back in the day, both your grandfather and Mr. Kong were not just close friends, but also successful business individuals. Mr. Kang's business was thriving, but he got entangled with some powerful politicians. It created significant trouble for him. Your grandfather stepped in to help, thinking the danger had passed, but those same forces took revenge. On the day of the accident, your parents were driving your grandfather's car when the tragedy occurred. Your grandfather was devastated and kept it hidden to protect you from the same fate. He loved you too much to risk losing you as well." As the call ended, Yun Seol sat frozen, her thoughts a chaotic mess. Grandpa loved me so much, but I was still a burden to him. Her mind raced with questions. Did Junyong know all this from the beginning? Was I a burden to him as well? What if he ends up meeting the same fate as my parents and grandfather? The thought made her chest tighten with despair. The door opened, breaking her spiraling thoughts. She turned quickly. "So," she called out, but her eyes widened when she saw Jin-young standing there instead. "How did you know I was here?" she asked, surprised. "Sokyu called me and told me," he said, closing the door behind him. His expression was firm, yet concerned. "Yuni, don't misunderstand. I know about the conversation you had with my mom," Jun-young began, his voice calm yet firm. "I don't misunderstand," she interrupted, her voice trembling as tears welled up in her eyes. "But now I know the truth. I was a burden to my grandpa, and I don't want to become a burden to you as well," she said, her words breaking as she began to sob. "What do you mean? Let's go home and talk," Jin-young said, frowning deeply. She shook her head, stepping back. "From now on, forget about the debt. I'll let you go," she said, her words causing him to freeze in his tracks. June quickly stepped forward and grabbed her hand. "You know, I didn't marry you out of gratitude," he said, his voice filled with conviction. But it wasn't out of love either, she interrupted, her tone resolute as she stated the facts, looking him directly in the eyes. She said, "We married under a contract, and now the grandpa has passed. The contract has ended. Do you understand?" Junyong. For a moment, Junyong stood still, the weight of her words pressing down on him. Finally, he gathered himself, his expression firm. "Why are you bringing up the contract again? That contract was void the moment he began, but Yin cut him off, her voice resolute. "From the beginning, our meeting was a mistake. This is what's best for both of us. Please leave," she said, her tone trembling with finality. "You know," Junyong shouted, frustration breaking through his composed exterior. He gritted his teeth, his voice softening but filled with regret. "That contract, if only I hadn't brought it up, if we had started our relationship differently." Clenching his fists, he looked down. "It doesn't matter now. I can see how worried you are, but you've never been a burden to me, and you never will be," he said firmly. Seeing her unyielding expression, he realized she needed time to calm herself. With a heavy heart, he turned and walked out of the room, knowing that pushing further would only worsen things outside. Sukin was waiting. He stepped forward, his face tense. "Mr. King, are you hurting her again? As her husband, how can you not understand her feelings?" he demanded. Jinyong turned slightly, his eyes cold. "I'm serious. If this continues, I'll take her away from you," Sakian warned, his tone resolute. "Just try and see," Jinyong replied before walking away. The next morning, back at the Kong house, Jeannie Young returned home. "How was dinner?" Mrs. Kong asked casually. "It was fine, and we decided to stay at a hotel." Jinyong lied, forcing a smile. "Where's Yunil? Didn't she come back with you?" "Is she misunderstanding something I said?" she asked, her worry evident. "No, Mom, there's nothing like that. She's fine. She's at campus because she has an event there," Jinyong explained smoothly. "That's a relief then," Mrs. Kong said with a small sigh. When he entered the bedroom, he noticed a gift box sitting on the table. Curious, he opened it and his expression softened. Inside was a pair of dumbbells and a note. "Think of me while exercising with these." His grip on the note tightened as her word from the previous night replayed in his mind. Elsewhere, Yuno met up with Ganga. "You should stay with me until you're ready," Gongan suggested gently. "Honestly, you should have called me last night. You didn't need to be alone." "Thank you," Yunil said, her gratitude genuine. Just then, Sujin's voice rang out from nearby. "Congratulations, Yunil, on your relationship with Sukiao. I left early that day, so I didn't get a chance to say it," she said with a falsely sweet smile. She sat down beside them, her tone laced with feigned concern. "I don't know who started linking me to Janong, but it seems you got dragged into this mess as well." "I'm so sorry," she said, looking at Yin Seal with mock sincerity. "I was honestly shocked." Then, with a sigh, she left for her class. "It seems she really doesn't know about your marriage," Gyeongan observed. "Yes, but soon none of this will matter," Yunil replied quietly, her gaze downcast. Later, Yunil returned to the Kong house to gather some belongings. Entering the bedroom, she noticed the gift box she had given Junyong was already open. Her heart wavered for a moment. Did he like it? She wondered, but quickly pushed the thought aside. It doesn't matter anymore. As she packed her clothes and prepared to leave, Mrs. Kong called out, "JY, are you back?" Startled, she paused. "I thought you were at campus, so I didn't prepare lunch," Mrs. Kong added. Realizing Junyong must have covered for her, Yunil decided to go along with the lie. "I still have some project work, Mom. I only came to grab a few things. I'll be staying with a friend tonight to finish it," she explained. "Oh, that's why Junyong said he was going out of the city," Mrs. Kong remarked, catching Yunil off guard. "Out of the city?" she thought, but quickly composed herself. "Yes, it's better for both of us to not get entangled," she thought silently. "All right, then take care of yourself," Mrs. Kong said warmly. "Thank you, Mom. I'll be going now," Yin Seal replied, stepping out of the house. As she walked away, Junyong's words echoed in her mind. "You are never a burden to me, and you never will be." Somewhere in a cafe, a man sat hunched over his laptop, typing away with urgency. His fingers hesitated for a moment when a shadow fell over his screen. Looking up, he saw Min Jin standing before him, offering a polite but firm smile. "Hello, I'm Min Jin from TJ Corp," he introduced himself. The man's expression tensed. Realizing who Min Jin was affiliated with, he quickly started shutting down his laptop, preparing to make an escape. But before he could rise from his seat, Min Jin casually placed a hand on the table, blocking his way. "It would be better if you comply," Min Jin said evenly, his tone polite yet laced with warning. The man gritted his teeth, clearly reluctant, but he knew he had no choice. With a resigned sigh, he leaned back in his chair, nodding. Elsewhere, Junyong lounged in his chair, phone in hand, listening to Min Jin's report. His expression remained unreadable as Min Jin updated him. "I managed to strike a deal with the reporter. We'll have access to all the data related to the No family," Min Jin informed him. Junyoung exhaled slightly, tapping his fingers on the desk. We're good. Keep an eye on everything. Min Jin hesitated for a second before asking. By the way, are you still in the country or have you already left for Singapore? I'm still here, Junyoung replied, but I'll be flying out tonight. Min Jin's voice carried concern. Isn't that dangerous? Junyoung leaned back, his gaze fixed on the screen in front of him deep in thought. What Sujin did wasn't much, but it was enough to bother Yun Seal, and she's capable of doing far worse in the future, he mused. But aside from that, one thing doesn't add up. Why is the No family suddenly being so accommodating toward us? Instead of coming after us, they're forming closer ties. That doesn't match their usual pattern. Min Jin pondered for a moment. Maybe because it benefits them. And let's not forget that Sujin has been chasing after you since childhood. That could also be a reason. Junyoung's jaw tightened as the pieces started falling into place. No family wanted him with Sujin. That's why they were orchestrating situations to push them together. For the first time, I'm actually thankful that Sujin likes me, he said with a dry chuckle. As long as they think there's a chance for us, my family and Yunil are safe for now. But that won't last forever. I need to find a better way to strike back when the time comes. He turned toward the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. A thought surfaced in his mind. If the No family had planned all this, then Sujin's unexpected arrival in Guam wasn't a coincidence either. Only a handful of people knew about that trip. My family and my team. His expression darkened as realization dawned. If it wasn't my family, then someone from my team must have leaked the information. The puzzle pieces were finally coming together. The next day, Gyeonggun urged Yunil to reconsider her decision about separating from Jinyoung. Are you sure this is what you really want? Have you thought it through? She asked, concern evident in her voice. But Yunil remained firm. At the end of the day, it was just a contract, she replied, her tone resolute. Yonggun sighed. But what about your feelings? Before Sakin could respond, Soken approached from behind, arms crossed. Because her feelings have been hurt too many times, I support her decision, he stated firmly. Jaeyoung narrowed her eyes at him. Now you're just taking advantage of the situation, she accused. Ignoring their bickering, Yunil walked ahead, lost in thought. After a few steps, she turned back. Gyeonggun, can I go back to your place first? She asked. Aren't we going to the cafe? Gyeonggun asked, surprised. Next time I'm feeling a little tired today, Yunil replied. Sensing her mood, Gyeonggun didn't press further. All right, I'll see you later, she agreed. As she watched Yunil leave, she shot a warning glance at Socket. You better not make things worse. Yeah, I get it, he muttered, understanding the seriousness of the situation. Later, at a cafe, Gong stood in line, trying to decide on a dessert when she noticed someone placing an order ahead of her. Annoyed, she glanced up only to realize it was Min Jin. You're here too? She asked. Raising an eyebrow, Min Jin smirked. Good food attracts good people. Seeing her indecision, he casually suggested a dessert option. Eventually, they ended up sitting together. As they chatted, Min Jin asked, Where's Yun Seal? I thought you two were always together. She had a lot on her mind, so she decided to head back early. Gyeonggun explained. Things between her and Mr. King have been difficult. Min Jin leaned back. Jin Yong buries himself in work whenever something bothers him. But don't think for a second he's not thinking about her. I just hope she rethinks her decision about separating, Gyeonggun admitted worriedly. Min Jin exhaled. There's not much we can do about it, he said. But trust me, Junyong isn't the type to give up easily. They continued talking for a while, the conversation shifting to lighter topics. Eventually, as Gyeonggun checked her phone, preparing to leave, Min Jin suddenly spoke up. Jong-un, he called, his tone casual yet direct. HM, she looked up. May I ask for your number? He asked, flashing a confident smile. I might have a few more good restaurant recommendations for you. Gyeonggun's eyes widened slightly at his unexpected request. For a moment, she hesitated, but then she nodded, exchanging numbers with him. At home, Yin Seol sat staring at her phone, unconsciously waiting for a call or message. Her mind drifted down memory lane, recalling all the moments she had shared with Jinyoung. The silence without him felt too vast, an emptiness she wasn't ready to acknowledge. But she reassured herself. Soon she would learn to be fine without him. Meanwhile, in Singapore, Junyoung found himself doing the same, staring at his phone, lost in thought. Countless questions ran through his mind. Was she doing okay? Did she miss him even a little? How much longer would she stay away? But then the negative thoughts crept in. Was this truly the end for them? Had she already decided to let go? A few days later at the campus, Yunal and Soyen walked side by side. The chill in the air made Sukin shiver in his thin clothes. But what really caught his attention was the lingering sadness in Yunil's eyes. You're still staying at Yong'un's place. Is that really okay? He asked, breaking the silence. She turned to him and nodded. Yes, Yong'un is fine with it, he sighed. I'm not talking about Yong'un. I mean, Mr. Kung, it's been a week since you left. Are you really going to part ways with him? She remained silent for a moment before replying. Does it matter? Weren't you the one supporting me a few days ago? she asked, looking down. He studied her carefully, concern flickering in his gaze. Then he spoke. Sujin froze, her breath hitching. Wife, what are you talking about? She asked, her voice shaking. Jin-young was annoyed. Sujin, I think we're all adults here. Do I really need to explain what a wife is? His words ripped with sarcasm. The murmurs around them grew louder. Look around you, he added coolly. Sujin turned her head, only now realizing the number of students and staff gathered, watching the scene unfold with their phones out, recording everything. Panicked, she clenched her fists and shouted. See everyone? Yoon Sol, who was supposedly dating Sookin, is now shamelessly flirting with Jin-young. But instead of siding with her, the crowd whispered among themselves. Everyone knew that Sookin had a playful reputation, and neither he nor Yunil had ever since confirmed any romantic involvement. As a result, all fingers pointed at Sujin, exposing her as the source of the rumors. To make matters worse, several people had recorded the entire incident, capturing every word in action. Meanwhile, at No Corporation, Mr. N entered the office, his expression tense as he handed a tablet to Sujin's father. Sir, you need to see this. The older man glanced at the screen. It was a news article. Scandalous photos of Sujin with several men. His expression darkened. Where is she? He asked, voice laced with irritation. Before Mr. N could respond, Sujin barged in. Father, you have to help me, she demanded, her voice desperate. Her father handed the tablet to her. Have you seen the news? He asked coldly. Confused, Sujin grabbed the device from Mr. and, her eyes scanning the headlines. The moment she processed the images, her face turned pale. What is this reporter doing? And why is everything going wrong today? She shouted, her frustration boiling over. Her father narrowed his eyes. What else happened? Still shaken, Sujin clenched her fists. Father, do you know that Kang Jin-young is married? She blurted out, his brows furrowed. I haven't heard anything about that. And if he did marry, it would have been to someone from a powerful family. This must be another baseless rumor. No, father, it's not a rumor. He said it himself today, in front of everyone. He's married to Chai and Seol. Sujin yelled, still unable to believe it. Mr. N's head snapped up. Show the intern? He asked, recalling her name. Who else? Sujin snapped. Your people are useless. How did no one find out about this before? Mr. N straightened, his expression unreadable. If my men weren't aware, that means it was a secret marriage. Kang Jin-young must have deliberately hidden it. As he spoke, his tablet suddenly lit up with a new notification. His eyes widened at what he saw. Sujin noticed his reaction and grabbed the tablet. Her stomach dropped as she saw the video playing. A clear recording of her attacking Yoon Seol, Jun-young stepping in, and his public declaration of love for his wife. Her blood ran cold. In a fit of rage, he threw the tablet across the room. This can't be happening, she screamed. Her father, however, remained eerily calm as he stood up from his chair. All right, I will talk to Junyo myself. He will have no choice but to choose you. His voice was laced with finality, his gaze sharp, and if he refuses, he'll regret it. Turning to Mr. And, he ordered, find out everything there is to know about Chun Seol. I want to know exactly who she is and why she thinks she can take what belongs to my daughter. At the Kong house, Junyoung and Yoon Seol were lost in each other's embrace, their long-awaited kiss deepening with every passing second. As he pulled away, a soft smile curved his lips as he wrapped his arms around her. Yinil, I saw how you handled Sujin today. You must have been holding back for a long time, he murmured. Your grandpa once told me that when you were a child, you had a quick temper and often got into fights. She buried her face in his chest. Yeah, that was true, but I haven't acted recklessly in a long time. It's just when it comes to you, I can't seem to hold back, she admitted. His hold on her tightened as she continued, worry creeping into her voice. But now that everything is out in the open, what will happen to you, Jin-young? I'm afraid of what they might do. Don't worry, he reassured her. I've already taken precautions. And after the contract, he folded his arms and paused for a moment before cupping her face. We've already broken so many of its rules that it's meaningless now. Without hesitation, he pulled out the contract and tore it into pieces, letting them scatter to the floor. Holding her close, he whispered against her hair, never leave me again, Yin Seol. I love you. Neither of them knew how much time had passed as they lay together, wrapped in each other's warmth. After a while, Yino called out, Junyoung, what about your position as a lecturer at my campus? What's going to happen now? He remained calm. Don't worry. We'll wait for their decision. Either way, I've already made all the necessary preparations, he replied. She sat up slightly, concern evident on her face. What do you mean? Now that I know about Sujin's family's involvement in my family's past, I need to know everything. As your wife, I'm worried about you. I don't want anything to happen. Happen to you. Junyoung studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, instead of answering, he leaned in and kissed her, his lips conveying the gratitude and love he felt for her unwavering concern. As they parted, She searched his face. Did you know about this from the beginning? She asked. He leaned back against the headboard, his eyes distant with thought. No, I only found out when we visited your grandpa earlier this year. He warned me to stay away from the No family. Sujin's family? She exclaimed. Yes. After that, I investigated everything. Their business connections, past dealings, and any possible threats. I made sure to secure my family's safety before taking any further steps, he explained. Before, she had thought Sujin's obsession with Junyoung was just that, an obsession. But now, it was clear that there was something much bigger at play. Reaching out, she grasped his hand firmly. Junyoung, you have to be careful. What happened to my family? They could target you too. Nothing will happen to me, he assured her. I've done everything I can to prepare for any situation and whatever comes our way. We'll face it together. Her resolve strengthened, and she met his gaze with determination. I'll stay by your side no matter what. We'll handle everything together, she vowed. Junyoung chuckled, amused by the fiery look in her eyes. Calm down first, he teased, gently pushing back a stray strand of her hair. Tomorrow, let's go to that cafe Minjin recommended. She tilted her head in confusion. Why tomorrow? Why not tonight? He smirked, leaning in. Because there's no way we're leaving this bed tonight. Today, I want to spend the entire day with you right here, he murmured, sealing his words with soft, lingering kisses. The next day, Junyoung and Yuniel arrived at the cafe Minjin had suggested. Yuniel was brimming with excitement, thrilled that they were finally making up for all the dates they had missed. As they stood in line, she glanced toward the entrance and noticed a familiar figure stepping inside. Young? She called out in surprise. Equally surprised, Gyeong-gun turned toward her. Oh, you two are here together? She asked. Before they could continue, the door opened again and another person entered. Yong-gun, you sit first. I'll order. Minin said. Min-jin. Junyoung blinked, taken aback. Yun-seal's eyes widened in realization. Wait a minute. Are you T2 dating? She asked, her voice filled with curiosity. The two stood in awkward silence, neither confirming nor denying it. As the four of them sat together, Yong-gun attempted to change the subject, but Yuni wasn't about to let it slide. No avoiding the topic. Spill it. Since when? She pressed. Min-jin, leaning back lazily with his chin resting on his hand, smirked. Well, it all started because of you guys. We kept meeting to talk about your problems, and then somehow we got close, he explained. Wow, this means we could go on double dates. Yin-seal clapped her hands in excitement. Junyoung, unimpressed, raised an eyebrow. Weren't you saying you wanted to go on dates with just me? He asked. She leaned in and kissed him playfully. That too, she whispered, coaxing him with a sweet smile. A few days later, as Yinio arrived at her campus, she noticed the lingering stares from people around her. It's been 2 weeks, but they're still staring, she muttered. Well, you did hug Mr. Kong openly on campus, so Kian pointed out lazily, sipping his coffee. And you know, since Mr. Kong is basically every girl's dream guy, they're probably just jealous, he added with a smirk. He then turned his attention to Gyeong-gun. And you didn't even tell me about your relationship, he complained. You don't need to know everything, Gyeong-gun replied coolly before getting up to grab her order. When she returned, she handed a sandwich to Yun-seol. Min-jin recommended this one. You should try it. Yun-seol happily took a bite, but immediately froze, her expression turning pale. She covered her mouth, pushed the sandwich back to Gyeong-gun, and rushed toward the restroom. Gyeong-gun and Sookin exchanged glances, both thinking the same thing. Moments later, Yunil returned, wiping her mouth. It was just a cilantro. I ate too much of it, she explained before reaching for a coffee. But before she could take a sip, both Gyeong and Soyun shouted in unison. Don't drink that, she paused mid-action, confused. What's wrong with coffee? She asked, looking between them. Yong-gun hesitated for a moment before finally voicing her suspicion. What if you're pregnant? Yunil nearly choked. Hey, I told you it was just a cilantro, she blurted out, flustered. So, ran a hand through his hair with a sigh. Yunil, you're married now. You should at least consider the possibility, he reasoned. Yeah, a lot of women don't notice the symptoms at first. You should get checked. Young Moon agreed. Yun-seol's eyes widened as her face paled. The thought had never even crossed her mind, but now that they mentioned it, it was entirely possible. Before she could say anything, a car pulled up behind them. Soaking glanced at the window, recognizing the driver instantly. Mr. King, he greeted casually. Before Junyoung could respond, Jaeyoung rushed over, and the two of them shouted in unison. Congratulations on becoming a father, Mr. King. Junyoung, caught completely off guard, froze in place. He stared at them in stunned silence, processing what he had just heard. As they arrived home, Yunil stood by the door, still lost in thought. Yunil, do you think what they said is true? Junyoung asked while removing his coat, his eyes fixed on her. I don't know, she replied, still processing everything. I ate a sandwich, and because of the cilantro, I threw up. That's all. He stepped closer, his brows furrowed. But how do you feel otherwise? Have her periods been late? He asked hurriedly. No, I feel fine, she reassured him. Junyoung exhaled, still unconvinced. You want to take a shower first, or should I go? She asked, trying to change the subject. You go first. I have something to do, he replied, watching her intently. After she left, he stood there for a moment, deep in thought. Soon, Yunil came back after a shower, but Junyong was nowhere in sight. Confused, she went looking for him. Are you looking for me? His voice came from behind as he entered the room. Where did you go? She asked curiously, without answering. He placed a small bag in front of her. I went to get this, he said, revealing a pregnancy test. Just take the test, he urged, his expression serious. A few moments later, Yunil returned, holding the result in her hands. She showed it to him. See, I told you it was just because of the cilantro, she said with a serious face. Junyong looked at her, then let out a soft chuckle before pulling her into a warm hug. And Junyong, to be honest, I'm not ready for a child yet. I still want to focus on my studies, Yun Sale admitted, her voice hesitant. She looked up at him, searching his face. Were you looking forward to it? Junyong cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing against her cheek. Yuni, I want us to be ready first. Maybe not now, he said, his voice deep and sincere. But yes, I am looking forward to it. The next day, as Yunil walked through the campus, she suddenly heard Jiang calling out to her. Yuni. Before she could react, Jiang grabbed her hand and pulled her into a quiet corner. What's going on? Is it urgent? Yoel asked, confused by her friend's anxious expression. Yes, it's really urgent, Gyeongun whispered, fumbling for words. She hesitated for a moment, then finally leaned in and said in a hushed voice, the truth is, the one who's actually pregnant is me. Yunil's eyes widened in shock. What? She grabbed shoulders, her voice filled with urgency. Are you sure? Did you take a test? Have you told Jun yet? I've taken the test twice, Gyeongun admitted, worry evident in her expression, still trying to process everything. Yunil bombarded her with more questions. But you guys only started dating a little while ago. How did this happen so quickly? Gyeong sighed it. It just happened. We got caught up in a moment, and we weren't careful. She hesitated before continuing. I don't even know how to tell Minjin. Our relationship is still new, and I have no idea how he'll react. Hearing this, Yun Sale's expression hardened. If he refuses to take responsibility, I'll be there for you no matter what. You won't be alone in this. Touched by her friend's support, Jiang smiled gratefully. Thank you, Yun Seo. That means a lot. That night at the Kong house, as Junyong worked in his study, he noticed Yun Seo enter the room, her expression unreadable. She remained silent, but he could sense something was bothering her. Closing his laptop, he leaned back in his chair. What's wrong? He asked. She hesitated before finally speaking. It's about Jiang. Junyong listened as she shared everything she had learned that Jiang was pregnant and hadn't told Jin yet. As she spoke, she glanced up at him, only to find that he didn't look surprised. Why aren't you shocked? She asked, narrowing her eyes in suspicion. Sensing her tone, Junyong smirked slightly. Oh, I'm surprised, he replied casually. But more importantly, how is she doing? He stood up and walked over to her. She's worried it might change their relationship since it's still new. Yin admitted. Honestly, I was shocked that they, went that far already. Were they already certain about each other's feelings? Meanwhile, we needed so much time for that. Junyong chuckled. That's just a man's instinct. Yin Seol, he said, his voice lower. When he's with the woman he loves, he doesn't hesitate. He leaned in slightly, lifting her onto the desk with ease. And you have no idea how many times I've struggled to hold myself back. But before he could go any further, Yun Seal interrupted him. Did Minjin tell you anything? She asked, her voice laced with curiosity. No, Jin Yong admitted, tilting his head slightly. But I've known him since he was 15. He's someone who always thinks ahead. If he's gone this far, that means he's already thought about marrying Gyeongun. His tone was serious. Hearing this, Yunil nodded, but hesitated for a moment before adding. There's something else I wanted to ask. She reached out, pressing a finger against his lips before he could lean in closer about Sujin's situation. You mentioned a lot of legal matters earlier, but I didn't understand everything. Could you teach me? I want to be able to handle things better in the future. For the past 2 weeks, she had been swarmed by reporters at the campus gates, forced to confirm that she was in fact married to Kong Juni of TJ Corp. The situation was no different for Junyong. He was constantly dealing with the media and his employees, all pressing him for details. Watching him, Yin couldn't help but laugh softly. She reached for him, pulling him into a kiss, one that took Junyong by surprise, but he quickly recovered, deepening the kiss as he wrapped his arms around her. A few days ago, Sujin's father ordered Mr. and to bring the reporter to him. Soon after, 2 men dragged the reporter into the room. Meanwhile, Minjin informed Junyong that the reporter had been captured by Mr. No. Frustrated, the reporter scoffed. Did you bring me here because of the rumors about Sujin? If so, I did nothing wrong. Those rumors exist because they're true. But besides, it wasn't difficult to uncover Sujin's wrongdoings. Plenty of people in her circle dislike her. Hearing his words, Sujin's eyes burned with fury. How dare a mere reporter speak to her that way? She turned to her father, demanding he do something. Mr. No stood up, his voice dangerously calm. Reporter Kim, he began. I assume you have a plan if you're speaking so boldly in front of me, because surely you understand that after such arrogance, walking out of here unscathed will be quite difficult. His words carried an unmistakable warning. The reporter fell silent, realizing the weight of the situation. He had already foreseen this outcome the moment he stepped into the room. Mr. No then turned to Sujin. For now, you need to step away from everything. Stay out of sight and don't go anywhere. Then, shifting his gaze back to Mr. And, he added, as for Kong Juni, it's time to apply some pressure. I'll handle him myself. Somewhere, Gyeong-gun sat anxiously, waiting for Minjin. When he arrived, he apologized for being late, but she quickly reassured him. It's not your fault. I called you out suddenly, she said. As he sat beside her, he suggested finding a cozy indoor place to escape the cold, scrolling through his phone for nearby cafes. But instead of responding, Jaeyoung kept her eyes on him. After a moment, she finally spoke. Minjin, do you love me? What if we got married? She asked, her voice steady. Minjin, caught off guard, replied casually, why are you suddenly talking about marriage? Anyway, I found a great restaurant nearby. They serve amazing wine. Before he could continue, she snatched his phone and with a serious expression said, listen to me, Minjin. From now on, I can't drink for the next 8 months. Minjin stared at her, processing her words. Realization hit him like a wave, and he instinctively took a step back, but he quickly composed himself, leaning closer. Are you saying I'm going to be? Before he could finish, Jaeyoung abruptly stood up. It's okay, Minjin. I don't expect you to take responsibility. I already knew the answer, but I just wanted to let you know since you are the biological father. And don't worry, Yinsei already agreed to be the godparent. She rambled on, her voice shaky. Minjin blinked in disbelief. Yinsei or what? He struggled to digest the whirlwind of information. Taking a deep breath, she forced herself to remain composed. Our relationship ends here, she declared, turning to leave. But before she could take another step, Minjin grabbed her wrist, pulling her back. How can you decide that on your own? His voice was firm. I love you, Jaeyoung, and I will marry you. But what about you if it wasn't for the baby? Would you still stay with me forever? She hesitated, then grabbed his collar. I like you so much, Minjin, she admitted, her eyes brimming with emotion. Without another word, he pulled her into a tight embrace. I won't let you or our child go. I'll meet your parents soon and convince them, he promised, holding her as if he'd never let her slip away. That night, after finishing his presentation, Junyoung returned home. As soon as he stepped inside, Yunil greeted him warmly. How did the meeting go? She asked, her eyes filled with curiosity. He gave her a reassuring smile. It went well, thanks to Minjin's hard work. The investors seemed interested in TJ Corp, and even Mr. No assured me earlier that we'll secure the deal, he explained. At the mention of Mr. No, Yunil's expression tensed slightly. Sensing her concern, Junyoung leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss on her forehead. Don't worry, he murmured. They won't be able to harm our family like before. She sighed in relief. Thank you for telling me everything clearly this time, she murmured. Then a thought suddenly struck her. Looking up at him, she asked, by the way, when is your birthday? Junyoung chuckled at her unexpected question. Why do you ask? She pouted slightly. Because I don't know what to give you. You already have everything. He looked at her with warmth, then grasped both of her hands. I don't need anything, Yunil. This is enough for me, he said, smiling. In the coming days, news of Junyoung and Yunil's first official appearance after the campus scandal spread like wildfire. After that, they no longer felt the need to hide their relationship. Whether it was an ice cream date or matching outfits, they looked every bit like a couple in love, drawing attention wherever they went. Sookin scrolled through an article featuring them, detailing their affectionate public displays. He sighed, then looked up from his phone. Right in front of him, the very same couple sat together wearing matching glasses as if the article had come to life. Junyoung was explaining something while Yunil, like a diligent student, took notes attentively. Sookin leaned toward Yonggun and whispered, I know the heater is broken here, but it's really not that cold, right? Don't be jealous, Sookin, Yonggun replied, smirking. Sookin pouted dramatically. Now that you both have your men, you don't understand the struggles of a single person like me. Aren't you late for work? Yin asked Jinyoung. No, there's no meeting scheduled today, so I'm free, he replied casually. But Jinyoung, look over there. She pointed to the other students who were openly staring at them, their two friends being the only ones unfazed. Just ignore them, Junyoung said, tightening his embrace around her. Yin Seol suddenly recalled an article that claimed Junyoung had fallen for her the first time he saw her at her parents' funeral. Curious, she turned to him. Is that true? Did you really fall for me back then? Junyoung smirked. How could I fall in love with a girl who was sobbing? He teased. Maybe you just felt pity for me, she countered, narrowing her eyes. Meanwhile, Son, who had been tolerating their endless flirting, finally had enough. He stood up abruptly. Enough. I don't want to witness any more of your flirting in public. And besides, if people keep seeing a teacher and student like this, it'll cause more rumors on campus, he complained. Jenny Young chuckled, unaffected. That won't be an issue anymore. Now that I'm taking full charge of TJ Corp, I won't be teaching anymore. I'm not her professor now, he stated matter-of-factly. So, even if he was no longer a professor, did that mean they could act like this in public? As Jun Young prepared to leave, he bid Yunil farewell with a quick kiss before stepping away. He turned to the others. Haven't any of you seen Sujin lately? Yunil shook her head. I haven't seen her for a while now. So Kun and Young Yun exchanged glances and confirmed the same. Juni's expression turned thoughtful. Be careful and watch over Yun Seol, he advised. Both of them reassured him. Don't worry. We'll take care of her, Gyeong-gun said confidently. With exams coming to an end, Sukun invited them to a party. At first, both Yun Seol and Young declined, wanting to spend time with their partners. However, Sukun clarified that this was not one of his usual wild parties. It was a private celebration just for them to mark the end of their exams. He even encouraged them to bring their partners along. Seeing his enthusiasm, they finally agreed. As they were leaving, Yuni turned to Gyeong-gun. So, how did you talk with Min-jin go? How did he react? Gyeong-gun didn't say anything, but the bright smile on her face was enough of an answer. Yun Se-ol smiled knowingly. I see, she said, linking arms with her friend as walked away. The next day, everyone gathered at Sukun's party. Sukun finally officially congratulated Jin Young on his wedding and asked them to consider this party as both an apology and a wedding gift. Later, he handed Yun Seola a glass of juice, having assumed she was pregnant, only for Jin Young to clarify that his wife was not expecting. From the side, Gyeong-gun raised her hand and revealed that she was actually the one pregnant. So, Kin stared in disbelief before complaining. Why am I always the last one to know everything? Directing his frustration at both Yun and Jeonjian. Just then, Min-jin, who had been silent, made an announcement. Apart from the pregnancy news, we have something else to share. We're getting married. While Sukun stood there, still bewildered by all the shocking revelations, Jun Young and Yun Seol offered their heartfelt congratulations. At the office, Jun Young handed over some documents to Secretary Yun, instructing her to check their legalities. Min-jin, standing nearby, observed her with a sharp gaze. I heard Mr. No wants to meet you, Min-jin said, his tone serious. Do you think it's about the reporter or Sujin? It could be anything, Jun Young replied, his expression unreadable, but deep down he couldn't ignore the possibility that it might also be related to Yun Seol. Remembering Min-jin's upcoming wedding, he congratulated him once again. Were you surprised? Min-jin asked, amused. Not really, Jin Young replied with a smirk. His mind drifted back to the first time he met Min-jin in high school. They had crossed paths at a bookstore where Min-jin had been reading a cookbook instead of a textbook. Curiosity got the better of Jun Young, and he asked, Do your parents own a restaurant? Min-jin had chuckled before explaining. No, they have a different business. I'll support them, but in 15 to 20 years, I plan to open my own restaurant. Jun Young had been shocked by his long-term vision. I didn't know you were this ambitious. You always seemed like the laid-back guy who didn't mind being second in class, Jun Young admitted with a confident smile. Min-jin had responded, That's because coming first in class was never my goal. I always know what I want, and when I find something, I work hard to get it. And that was exactly how he felt when he first met Gongin at Jun Young's wedding. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Yunyul and Gyeong-gun arrived at a wedding dress shop. I've never been the type to settle down, Kyung-yun admitted, fidgeting with a fabric swatch. But when Min-jin proposed, I couldn't refuse. And it wasn't just because of the baby. It was something I wanted deep down. Yun Seol squeezed her hand reassuringly. Maybe you fell in love before you even realized. Jaeyoung smirked. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? I mean, you couldn't exactly turn down Mr. Kong either, could you? But apart from her teasing, Gongin expressed her happiness. Now that they were officially a couple, she felt even more grateful to have found the right man. And thanks to Yunil, she was now finding the perfect dress as well. How do you know when it's the right dress? Gyeong-gun asked, turning to her. You never really know until you try it on, Yunil giggled. But as she looked at Gyeong-gun in the gown, something clicked. This one, she murmured. And the moment Gyeong-gun saw herself in the mirror, she knew it too. That evening, as Yunil helped Mrs. King prepare dinner, Jun Young walked into the house. Noticing her right away, he casually asked, So, how was shopping with Jaeyoung-yun? Before he could finish his question, Yunil rushed toward him and planted a kiss on his lips, catching him completely off guard. Jun Young stiffened and his ears burned as he became acutely aware that his mother was standing right behind them. What were you saying? She asked, oblivious to his flustered state. Clearing his throat, He struggled to regain composure. I was asking about shopping. Oh, we may check out a few more stores tomorrow, she answered breezily, still lost in her own excitement. Jin-young was still visibly blushing. Seeing his reaction, she called out, Jan-young, from behind them. Mrs. King stifled a laugh, quickly raising her phone. She snapped a picture, capturing the moment forever. But then, realization struck. Yuniel turned, her face going pale. Oh no, Mom was here, she whispered in horror. Mrs. Kong smiled mischievously. Don't mind me, she said, clearly enjoying herself. At dinner, Mrs. Kong suggested that Jun-young take some time off from work and go on a trip with Yuniel. Jun-young turned to her, a slight smile on his lips. So what do you think? Min-jin recommended a great resort, and we can also go skiing there, he said. Before Yuniel could reply, an excited voice cut in. Can I come too? Juno asked eagerly. Of course, Yuniel answered without hesitation. Meanwhile, Juni's smile faltered as he realized his plans for a romantic getaway had just been derailed. That night, Suk-yin called Yuniel, asking if she wanted to join an internship at a company his friend had suggested for the upcoming vacation. But this time, she was determined. No, I'm going skiing. I really want to enjoy this vacation, she said excitedly. Hearing this, So-yin perked up. Skiing? That sounds fun. Can I join too? Immediately, she shut down the idea. No way. Jin-young would never agree to that. The next day, everyone gathered for the skiing trip. Gyeonggun and Jun were also there, making a trip with both friends and family. Just as they were about to set off, a familiar voice rang out. Hello, everyone. Heads turned. It was so cute, standing there with a smug grin. Instead of interning this time, he had somehow managed to join the trip.